All right, guys, we're going into the last week of June here on Kentucky Lake, and I wanted to give you a rundown on kind of what's happening out there. I try to touch base with everybody every couple of weeks and give you guys a fishing report. I have been out on the water just about every day. I'm doing some electronic setups, but I've been doing a good number of fishing trips as well. And the big question I'm getting is, have they showed up offshore? Are they going to get schooled up? And since the last time I talked to you guys a couple of weeks ago, the fish had not made that big push out deep, and I touched on the combination of a lot of things of why we're not seeing the big schools out on the lake. And the biggest thing is obviously the fish population and lack of bait. Asian carp are eating up all the plankton. We don't have the bait fish that we had in years past, and the fish just aren't schooling up out there. So if you're coming down here and you're idling around, you're scanning and you're not seeing them, it's frustrating because that's what we know here. That's what Kentucky Lake has been known for. But at the same time, you've got to understand that, it's the new lake that I always refer to it as the new lake. And there's always ways to catch them. We're going to go through a couple of years here, I think, of catching smaller fish. We don't have a lot of 2 to 3 pound class of fish in the lake right now. We've got a lot of 13-inch, 14-inch fish that I've talked about, and I'm having a good time catching those. A lot of my clients are having a good time catching those. And we're fishing shallow for the most part. I've talked a little bit before. You can go out there and dabble around out deep and get you a few bites a day at the end of the day. But as far as coming down here and scanning and looking for a lot of big schools of fish, it's just not going to happen. You'll find little wad here, little wad there, and a lot of those fish are relating to more of the brush piles and structure stuff. And it's places that are a little bit shallower, and that we don't really want to idle over the top of them. Anytime you get in 10 feet or less, I don't like to idle over the top of them. But water temperatures, it's typical summertime stuff on a TVA lake. We're looking at 80 degrees, low 80s, and it's warming on up there. So it's summertime everywhere down the Tennessee River chain. Fish are offshore, and there's a good number of fish offshore here. I've not spent a ton of time fishing out there, but the fish that I have been catching out there is, I'm having to slow down. Throwing a swim bait, crankbait has not been, that's just not one of the deals that's happening right now. You really have to slow down and finesse them. And one bait I want to show you that I've been playing with a lot here lately, this is a new worm from 6 Sense Fishing. It's called the ridge worm. And this is a green pumpkin. They're going to have a variety of colors. This is actually not out yet. You can check them out on their website, 6sensefishing.com. But I've played with this bait a good bit, and you can see on here it's got a big flat paddle looking tail. It's not a paddle tail, but it's real wide and tapering down the back, and it really comes alive in the water. Narrow body. It's a 10-inch worm. This is a green pumpkin I've been throwing. Throw it on a Texas rig and throw it on a jig head. You can actually rig it the Nico style, put a weight in the end of it, and you'd be surprised at what it looks like in the water whenever it's, whenever you drop it down there and that tail just comes alive. But fishing around brush, shallow cover, that's been a good bait. The Divine Shaky Worm Plum, I fish this bait a lot in the summer months on a jig head. 6 Sense makes a Divine jig head that works really good on it. You can Texas rig it. There's a lot of, Zoom makes their plastics. They've got the Zumo Monster that's been a staple here for so many years. But another bait that I've caught a few fish on just fishing, pulling up and just winding a swim bait around. This is the Frenzy Shad from Ignite. I touched on it a little bit last week. 3/4 or 1 ounce head, with a 6/0 hook in it. And a lot of times I'm just taking that bait right there and going and fishing again. Instead of scanning over places and not seeing fish, it's places that I've historically caught them. And if you get a bite on it, it's usually a pretty good one. But you just don't get a ton of bites on it like we used to back in the good old days. But the biggest thing the last couple of weeks have been shad on the banks. The emerald shiner that I talked about last time, it's the fry is everywhere. They're growing fast. And the Mayfly Hatch, that's been the biggest keys for me the last couple of weeks. And a couple of baits that have been really key. Number one, I told you before, when I see a Mayfly Hatch, that's when I start fishing a topwater. And a bait here, this is the 6 Sense Splashback 70. It's a little bit smaller profile, and you can see this is a bluegill pattern. I've also got one here in a shad color. Let me talk just a minute about that. a lot of people, they have the misunderstanding of a mayfly hatch, and those fish are up feeding on, you know, the mayflies. Well, what happens is during a mayfly hatch is a lot of those bluegill and shad and stuff will come up on the bank, and you'll see them popping those mayflies. And that's why I like to stick with like a bluegill color in my popping style baits. You know, the old pop-ars, you know, any of those popping style baits that you can fish right along the bank. And you'll get on the bank and you'll see those bluegill and stuff come up popping those mayflies. And that's a good time to throw that pop-ar. It's a fun way to catch them. You catch a lot of fish, especially the number of 13, 14 inch fish we've got in the lake. You can really have a good time for that first couple of hours in the morning. And then once that first 2 to 3 hours starts winding down and it starts getting kind of slow, then the afternoon bite has just been really, really tough for the most part. And that's when I'll pick up my worm and I'll go out and fish, you know, some of the offshore stuff. Another bait, this is a bluegill pattern. This is the Crush 50. Any kind of little square bill, you know, if you've got a square bill that's your favorite, you can throw a shad color, you can throw a bluegill, but keep in mind those bluegill are up there. They're popping. You'll see them popping those mayflies. And I've just been going down the bank fishing places where I'll see the mayflies, and it's something you got to look for. It's a lot like looking for a shad spawn. So you'll get up on the bank and you'll look for those gravel areas or those main lake places where you know that there's some overhanging limbs. That's where you'll see those mayflies. A lot of times you can go up there and you can knock them down and come back an hour or so and you can catch some on top water. That's been a pretty fun little way to catch them. Catch a lot of fish doing that. Another thing is the swim bait. I'm still catching a good number of fish on the swim bait. You know, a 3/16 or a 1/4 ounce head, just a little jig head, round jig head like that, and the Divine swim bait. Remember, there's two sizes. I've talked about this before. There's a 3.2 and a 3.8. And you can see this, this is a sexified shad, they call it. It's like a bluish color on the top and a chartreuse on the bottom. It's good for those overcast, rainy days. We've had a few of those. And then just the Pro Shad color. You know, it's just the typical Pro Blue looking colors, you know, that we've always fished just on a jig head. Another bait that I've played with a lot here lately, the guys over at Ignite have sent me some baits. This is the Ignite 3.5. This is a Chartreuse Shed. You can see that little guy right there. And what I'm doing with these baits is I'm putting them on a spinning rod, because anytime I'm fishing something real small like that jig head right there, I can take that bait on a spinning rod and I just feel a lot more comfortable fishing it, you know. And I'm just looking for areas where I'm seeing a lot of that, the emerald shiners that are up on the bank, and you'll see that first thing in the morning. And I'm just fishing around those areas. You'll see a lot of skipjack and stuff that are up roaming around that are kind of popping the bait. And again, there's just a lot of activity related to the bank right now. So you guys that have come down here for so many years, or a lot of you local guys that follow any of my stuff, you know, there's other ways to catch them besides catching them on a ledge. I myself have actually enjoyed the last couple of years of, I love to catch them offshore as much as anybody, but I'm having to kind of relearn the lake. And that's what, you know, that's what I recommend doing, is getting out there and, you know, even if you don't catch a lot, I learn something every time I go. But that's a few ways that I'm catching some fish. One thing to look for the next couple of weeks, and I saw this last year, I'll share with you, and you probably remember me talking about it a little bit last year, is a swim jig around docks. And what happens is those shiners will eventually get about 2 inches long, and they'll, for whatever reason, they'll start showing up on docks. They're just like a bass, you know, the bait gets around those docks and gets up in that shade, and any of those shaded areas. So it's getting that time. I've checked it a little bit and I've not seen it a lot, but it's getting time for those fish to move up on those docks, and you'll catch a good number of fish. You'll catch the smaller ones like I've talked about, but you'll catch some quality ones every now and then too. But that's just a swim jig with the Divine swim bait on the back, fish 3/8 up around the docks, just a shad color, you know. That's another bait, you know, to try over the next couple weeks. Another bait that I have tried shallow and I've caught a few fish on it is just a buzz bait. This is a black buzz bait. This is from Accent. This is the Jacob Wheeler buzz bait. I've got the Hog Farmer, I forget what they call that little single tail grub on the back of it. You know, any kind of trailer on the back. Everybody knows how to fish a buzz bait. That's nothing special, but anytime there's a lot of activity around the bank like I've been seeing, I try to fish that topwater a lot. And then, you know, if you're just wanting to cover water, you can throw that buzz bait. But overall, fishing still, you know, it's just hit or miss. I'll have one good day and one really, really tough day. And anybody that's been out with me, you know, that I'm just trying to, the guys that's coming down and fishing with me, still spending some time on the lake, you know, it's going through some tough times. I've touched on it a little bit, but still ways to catch them. We're still having a good time. We're still learning something every time we go. Are we catching a ton of 3 to 5 pounders every time we go? Absolutely not. You know, and if you talk to those guys that have spent any time down here at all, you just not seeing that right now. But the good news is we've got a lot of up and coming, you know, 13, 14 inch fish. I know you hear me say that time and time again, but it's kind of the new lake. It is what it is. But that's kind of it in a nutshell. Any of you guys that are looking for a trip, I'm doing a lot of electronics classes the month of July and August. I'm already booking up for the fall. I know a lot of the fall classics aren't coming here anymore, but I've got plenty of openings here coming up in the fall. But make sure you follow me on social media. Shoot me an email if I can help. info@brandonhunterfishing.com, and I'll see you guys on the water.